Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Fifth Quarter. I'm Mike Ciarochi, sports editor of the Herald-Standard, and I'm joined again, as always, by George Von Benko, author of Memory Lane and WMBS radio personality. George, we got a lot to talk about today.
We certainly do. Everybody was so worried, including me, about the road to the Super Bowl having to lead through New England. And what has happened in the NFL playoffs so far this season is a perfect illustration of why my father always told me, don't bet.
Yeah.
Because who could have seen Seattle knocking off New Orleans and some of the other things, and the Jets going in and beating the Patriots. Dad always said, don't bet.
Keep your money in your pocket. Right?
That's right.
Yep. So now we have the AFC Championship game here in Pittsburgh Sunday. The New York Jets coming in to meet the Steelers. Who'd have thought? I mean, preseason, the Jets were a sexy pick for the Super Bowl. The Steelers were not forgotten by any stretch, but they had some of the other things on their plate between the Roethlisberger suspension and this and that, and they've dealt with some injuries. They played not the whole season, a good portion of the season without perhaps their best run-stuffing defensive lineman.
And two tackles.
Smith, and the two offensive tackles gone. Yet here they are, the Steelers and the Jets meeting this Sunday at Heinz Field.
And it's interesting because I have pretty much foo-fooed Mark Sanchez all season long. And I even pointed it out when we were going into the playoffs that, in the second half of the season, leading into the playoffs, in the second half of games, his quarterback rating was only 66%, which is not that good. But somehow, some way, they have managed to win, and he has progressively gotten better. I mean, I thought, that he was tremendous against the Patriots.
Outplayed the great Tom Brady yesterday.
I can't figure out what's going on with him because I thought he looked disinterested, frustrated.
Yeah.
I mean, it didn't look like Tom Brady.
No, it didn't. It really... A lot of things about that game that stick out. Number one to me is that the Jets out-physical New England. They put up a good, strong defensive front, and when you get physical with Tom Brady, he doesn't like it a whole lot.
No, and that's what Brady is always mentioned in that elite strata of quarterbacks, along with Peyton Manning, and Roethlisberger sometimes doesn't get his just due. But there's a difference between those quarterbacks and Roethlisberger is a warrior. He mixes it up. He doesn't shy away. The play he made in Baltimore with Suggs hanging on him, Brady and Manning and those guys couldn't make a play like that.
No, and it's almost as though if the Jets were to come in with the same physical game plan that they took to New England, it could backfire. I mean, I'm certain that they will come in and try to out-physical the most physical team in the league, the Steelers. But I think it would be to their own detriment to come in and try to get rough and tumble with Ben Roethlisberger. I just think he thrives under those.
He does. He's sort of like the guy on the Sandlot. You cut down your garbage can and you go, and he's going to make a play. He's going to do something, but his toughness cannot be overlooked. It'll be interesting. The other thing, everybody's just gnashing their teeth about the problems on the Steelers' offensive line, and they reared their ugly head again against Baltimore because Flozell Adams got sick, and then Jonathan Scott got hurt, and all of a sudden you got Legursky and Trey Essex in there, and you're wondering what's going to happen. And they're saying, how are they going to stand up against the Jets? But you know what? I look at that a different way. Roethlisberger hasn't played behind a solid offensive line in at least 4 or 5 years. He's sort of used to playing that way.
Yeah, and there was a theory prior to this season, probably throughout his career, that he makes it difficult for an offensive line to look good because he does not drop back in the pocket and wait for stay in the comfort of the pocket and wait for things to happen. He goes out, leaves the pocket, and makes things happen. So it's kind of a different animal, and I'm sure the offensive line gets blamed a little bit too much for some of their shortcomings, and they don't get enough credit when they manage to piece it together with duct tape or however you want to phrase it, but they did. They pieced it together and pulled out a big win over a quality opponent.
And how they're doing it is with smoke and mirrors. Because I look at that and I say, how can they continue to play this way week in and week in? And, yes, they get beat sometimes, but they win more than they lose, and they're able to, and it's just amazing. It really is amazing that they've been able to do what they've been able to do behind that line.
Bruce Arians, as recently as Saturday at halftime, was rumored to be in his last game with the Steelers. If they ended up coming back and winning the game. Now, how about Bruce Arians? Here's a guy who has been directing this offense, been to and won the Super Bowl, in another AFC Championship game this weekend. How can the guy be in any job insecurity with what he has done with what he has? It used to be the Steelers had first and second round picks along the offensive line. That's not the case anymore. They got their first and second round picks in the backfield and the receivers and the skill positions.
But one glaring discrepancy.
True.
Marquise Pouncey has. What a linchpin to have in the center of your offensive line.
He's going to become the glue that holds.
I'd like to see him draft his brother.
Maybe I don't know. I think we got the best Pouncey of
that might very well be. But you're right. Arians is a lightning rod, and I think that goes with the territory. I can go back and remember people complaining about Ron Earhart. It's been that way with the offensive coordinators in this town. One thing I will say about Arians, though, he and the Steelers, and I said this last week, the Steelers to a man have said, in number 7, we trust. And that was the difference in the ball. The defense did some great things, but the difference in the ball game was Ben Roethlisberger compared to Joe Flacco. And at the end of the ball game on 3rd and 19, Roethlisberger said he was going to chuck it downfield, and Arians let him do it.
It's hard to argue with that. It's obviously in hindsight. And the way Roethlisberger described it post game was totally accurate. Hey, let's send a guy deep. We'll throw it down there. If I get a pick, so what?
It's like a punt. And
then you're still in a tie game.
Let's give the defense some love too before we.
Well, I want to make one more point about yesterday's New England Jets game.
Okay.
I talked about the Jets defense out-physicaling New England's offense. I think New England's defense was exposed by the Jets yesterday.
Well, I had wondered about them all season long, how they were doing it. And their numbers weren't great, but...
No. Well, they were playing with a lot of leads.
They were playing with a lot of leads, and it's a lot easier to do that. And plus, your numbers are skewed a little bit when you're playing with leads because the other team's throwing the ball so much and doing some other things. But no, they're not a good defense. And Bill Carr was absolutely right when he said to Shannon Sharp and Boomer Esiason and those guys the other day on the post-game show after the New England Jets game, and he just looked them right in the eye and says, you can say what you want to say. Polamalu didn't play the last game. They have not played a defense like the Steelers' defense.
True. The Jets?
The Jets. Yeah. They have not played a defense like the Steelers' defense.
It's going to make for an interesting show, but let's give a little bit of love to the Steelers' defense from this past week. The third quarter numbers were just incredible.
They 4 total yards for Baltimore in the third quarter, 3 turnovers inside the 25-yard line, which turned the entire game around, and they wound up with 28 total net yards in the second half.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and I was looking through the stat sheets here. Joe Flacco's passer rating for the game. Well, 61 is not awful, but when you look at the halftime, he had a 95.1 rating.
So it dropped precipitously.
Oh, yeah. He was 12 of 18 in the first half, finished the game with four more completions in the second half. That's all, 16 out of 30.
Well, the defense forced 3 turnovers inside the 25-yard line, and they had 5 sacks in the second half.
And the offense cashed them in.
They did.
17 points.
No field, one field goal,
third possession.
But for the most part, they cashed in the red zone, which is important. And they just turned the entire ball game around.
And I think it was also an important part of that was that one of the touchdowns was to Hines Ward. I think it was important to get him into the flow of things. He'd been kind of taken, I hate to say a bad rap, because, the rap is what it is. I mean, if you're not being thrown to and you're not as important to the offense, that was documented over the last 6 to 8 weeks as the rookie wide receivers stepped up and started making plays. But I thought it was a very nice touch. They went to him again for trying for the second touchdown. Didn't get it. It might have been right before the field goal kick. But they brought him back into the fold and gave him some meaningful catches. Got him in the end zone. I think it's good to keep them up.
And I do want to single out Ryan Clark, who had perhaps his best game, I think, as a Steeler in this ball game.
Perhaps
he forced the fumble with Ray Rice. He stuck his hand in there, and he baited Flacco on that play. They thought they had one-on-one coverage, and he came over, and the overthrown pass, they baited Flacco into that throw.
You know, and it surprised me. The play call itself surprised me from Baltimore. You know, you just had a turnover that the opponent turns into a touchdown. You're in your own territory. You know, why risk the turnover?
Well, I think he saw the one-on-one because they had 9 people in the box, and they backed off. But what Clark did is they thought they had a favorable matchup with Heap, but Clark played over to that side of the field as soon as the play started to unfold, so he was actually throwing into double coverage.
Yeah. And it's hard to say whether it was an overthrow or whether Heap may have broken his route short. You never know, but all we know for sure, what you can document is Ryan Clark came up with the interception, and by no small, that was a big play in the game that led the Steelers into this championship game.
Now that being said, a lot of people there was a lot of celebrating going on after the Jets beat the Patriots, and they think that it's pretty much a lock that they're going to the Super Bowl. Let's not forget that the Steelers have had a spotty history in some AFC Championship games. Alfred Papuno. Need I remind people about Alfred Papuno in 1994 in the loss to San Diego? They lost to Denver in 1997.
It was the linebacker, Dennis. Linebacker knocked the ball down from Barry Foster.
Yes, and I can't remember who it was.
First name is Dennis. I know that.
And it was right at the goal line.
Yes.
The incomplete pass. They lost to Denver in 97, and of course the 2 losses to New England in 2001, 2004.
The 2 most recent AFC Championship games held in Pittsburgh were won by the Steelers.
They won. So,
including Mike Tomlin as 1 out of 1 as the head coach of the Steelers. So I think it's a good matchup for the Steelers.
I do too. Now let's remember something too. A lot of people say, well, they beat them during the regular season. I think it's good, but that the Steelers are going to remember that they lost. Yeah. But they didn't have Paul Amalo, and they didn't have Heath Miller.
Relatively recent. I mean, it should be. It's not like they're going to have to do a deep study into their past to find the game film or anything. I mean, it's going to be in their memories.
And I get back to what I said. I'm giving Sanchez his props because he's played very well.
Yes.
But I'm going to tell you one thing. I like Dick LeBeau going up against a young quarterback. I really do. I think he is going to make life miserable for Mark Sanchez.
And, don't forget, the Jets have a tremendous offensive line. They've kind of like the old Steelers. They have
they rushed for 106 yards against the Steelers in that last game.
And they have at least 2 first-round picks on the offensive line: Nick Mangold and DeBrickashaw Ferguson.
That's right.
The Jets' offensive line was good enough to get rid of Alan Faneca this year. Let's not forget.
That's true.
Faneca ended up playing with Ken Wisenhunt out in Phoenix, if I'm not mistaken.
That is correct. But it's all set up. It's going to be a great matchup. There's a lot of different storylines in this game with Darrelle Revis coming back to Pittsburgh, Santonio Holmes coming back to Pittsburgh. A lot of great storylines.
All the Jets are coming back to Pittsburgh. They were just here less than a month ago.
That's right, yeah.
Maybe it was a month ago. But anyway, just a reminder: the game will be 6:30 p.m. kickoff at Heinz Field Sunday. It will be after the NFC Championship game.
We didn't talk about that. That's going to be a great matchup, and I really like the way Aaron Rodgers is playing.
Yes, Aaron Rodgers. I wouldn't be surprised at all to see the Packers beat the Bears. I don't know if you would call that an upset or not. They're both NFC North Division opponents.
I think they ought to make them all wear leather helmets in honor of the rivalry.
Okay, well that'll wrap up this segment of the fifth quarter. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. Thanks, George, for being here. And we'll do it again next week. Till then, see ya.